Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Deborah Dobkins, Dean of the Women's College at Brenau University, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to our Zoom event today. You are in for a real treat with our Gold Series speaker, Janie Bryant, as she shares her story from the Academy to the Emmy, no less. So we are delighted to welcome you all here. Janie is our second ever Gold Series speaker, and we are delighted to welcome her. She's actually our first ever virtual speaker, so we're delighted that we have her as our guest today. It's also my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the president of Brenau University, Ann Sclater, who I know is with us today and will be joining in the conversation on the Q&A in a little bit. So welcome, Janie. We're delighted to have you, and I would like to share with everyone Janie's biography. Janie is an Emmy Award-winning costume designer, well known for her distinct designs on the groundbreaking, fabulously stylish Mad Men for AMC and HBO's down and dirty Western drama, my husband's favorite, Deadwood, for which she earned the coveted Emmy Award. She doesn't mention she was also nominated for some more Emmys, but we'll get her to talk about that in just a minute. And Janie recently wrapped production on the glamorous, star-studded first season of Why Women Kill. We all need to know the answer to that, I believe, starring Lucy Liu on CBS. Janie was also the costume designer on the Amazon series The Romanovs, which took her to Paris, Bucharest, and Toronto during filming, which sounds especially appealing right now as we're all at home. I'm very much at home. Janie left her mark on the short-lived but critically acclaimed Amazon show The Last Tycoon, a series that showcased the mesmerizing Hollywood glamour of the 1930s. In 2016, Janie was back in Toronto designing another box office smash hit, the terrifying and highly anticipated remake of Stephen King's iconic It. Janie has been cited as influencing designers Michael Kors, Vera Wang, Prada, Marc Jacobs, among others. After studying fashion design and moving to Paris, Janie moved to New York, where she became involved with the film and television industry. She later relocated to Los Angeles to follow her passion and advance her career as a Hollywood costume designer. Along with her critically acclaimed and prestigiously awarded costumes, Janie has also designed the successful Mad Men collections in collaboration with AMC and Banana Republic. And she's worked with many brands, including Brooks Brothers, Hearts on Fire, Diamond, Sony, Nike, Maidenform. I could go on and on. Janie also designed the uniforms for the relaunch of the Watergate Hotel in Washington. In 2011, Janie released her first book called The Fashion File, with style tips and inspiration to help every woman become her own leading lady. She's also been featured in a new book called Southern Women by Garden & Gun, and we'll be hearing more about that. Janie's new and exciting project is an action-packed espionage FX series called The Old Man, starring Jeff Bridges and John Lithgow. She can be found on Instagram at Costume Designer Janie Bryant, and she's very graciously agreed to answer any questions on Instagram that we might not get to. So that's a long way of saying, welcome back home, Janie Bryant, Academy alumna.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Oh my God, I'm exhausted hearing my bio. It didn't happen in one day, I can tell you that. No, I'm so happy to be here to talk to y'all. I mean, Brenau has such a special place in my heart, and I was so blessed to be able to go to Brenau.
Well, thank you, Janie. So tell us a little bit about your Brenau experience before we talk more about that incredible and exhausting career of yours.
No.
So tell us how your single gender educational experience perhaps shaped or impacted your journey.
You know, I really loved going to Brenau because I felt like for the first time, I went to Brenau my junior and senior year of high school. And, you know, up until that point, I had been going to public school, co-ed school. And when I got to Brenau and an all-girls situation, it was so amazing because for the first time, I felt like I could totally be myself. You know, there was not, like, I didn't feel afraid to answer questions. I wasn't intimidated, you know, I mean, like, I think going to a co-ed school for me, you know, men are very competitive, and a lot of times the girls don't get to excel or feel like they can excel in the classroom or be the stars of the classroom educationally, because the boys are competing for the girls' attention, right? So in my situation, I felt like when I got to Brenau, I really excelled in learning, in just really being more confident. And it was also great that we were only allowed to see our dates on Wednesdays and on the weekends. And my boyfriends were always, from Riverside Military Academy. And, it was great that, we girls never had to worry about really dolling up during the week, except for Wednesdays and the weekends. So, I really appreciated that. And I always loved that, we always made the boys wait, and it drove them crazy. And it was the best thing. We didn't know that was happening, but it really was the best thing that we could have done, to make us, be more in love with us than they already were. So it was very effective to only be able to date on Wednesdays and the weekends.
I think there might be something to that. And, I'm often asked by young women considering a women's college, but wait, what about the boys? And I always tell them they know you're here.
Yes.
They knew you were there.
It's so true. If a man wants you, he will find you anywhere, even if you are in an all-girls school.
Well, and we happen to have a little evidence in our archives that Janie was indeed at Brenau Academy, and she's very graciously agreed to let us share her senior photograph. Isn't that the cutest thing you've ever seen in your life? And she has a very inspiring quote about leadership. No surprise to a woman who has gone on to blaze a trail. So I think that's pretty darn adorable.
Oh my gosh. I can't, you know what? I can't even believe y'all just read the quote to me. It's so corny, but I don't even know where I found that. But like I said, oh, I was so insightful at, 16 or 17, whatever. I don't know. I can say, you know what? It's a good quote though, because I do think it does say a lot about our bonding and our great friendships that we really we're able to nurture at Brenau. And it's so funny because I'm at my mom's house. I'm not in Los Angeles right now. I'm at my mom's house in Tennessee. And two girls from Brenau Academy just came to visit my sister and me. We spent the weekend together. And, we hadn't seen each other in so long, but it was like no time had gone by. And we really, it just goes to show you like what a great sisterhood it is at Brenau.
Well, that's really terrific to hear, and I always love it when alums talk to me about their friendships that are still going strong, no matter how long it's been since they were actually on our campus. And I think you've addressed a little of what makes it magical in many ways, that sisterhood where women are lifting each other up, but also an environment in which you can be your very best and truest self. And
Absolutely.
I think you really brought that into play. So tell us, how did you find your way to from Brenau to Hollywood? How did you find your way into your career?
Well, my degree is in fashion design. I'm cum laude in Bachelor of Arts. And after I got my degree, I left and I went to Paris because I thought that I was going to learn to speak French and become a famous fashion designer all in 6 months. It is good to be naive and inexperienced, just to be like, I could do anything. I really felt that because I had no experience really. So I just thought that, that's what I wanted to do. So that's where I went. So I went to Paris, and I basically did not learn how to speak French. I did not get a job, and I did go to museums every day. And I did date a gorgeous man that wore like beautiful corduroy and took me to fabulous lunches, and we had glorious wine. And anyway, it was so fun. And so I learned a lot of other things, and it was great to be able to go to the museums every day. It was so inspirational. I loved that. And just to live the life in Paris and it was very bohemian until, my father said, Janie, you must come home and get a job. So I went to New York, and first I had a job in Atlanta for a little bit and as a fashion designer, just for a short stint. And I decided that I really need to be in New York. So I went to New York. I was working with a designer. His name is John Scher, fashion designer. I was his assistant. And I met a lot of people in the film business at that time. There was a kind of like independent filmmaking scene going on in New York at that time. And I met a costume designer at a Christmas party, and we talked for a really long time. And I woke up the next morning and I just knew that I was meant to be a costume designer. I did have a background in design. That was my major, fashion design. So I knew about construction. I knew about drawing. I mean, I've been illustrating since I was a little girl. And I've been making clothes since I was a little girl. So I had a lot of skills. I just really knew nothing about filmmaking, but I decided, again, good to be naive and optimistic. I decided, and to have dreams, you got to have dreams. I decided that I was going to be a costume designer. And so that's what I really set out to do. And I called every single person in the film business that I had met. And I said, I want to be a costume designer. I'll do whatever I need to do. I don't care what it takes. And so about a few weeks later, and I was consistently calling people every day because nobody was going to tell me no. And so I got sorry, somebody's calling me. Sorry, I'll be back. I got a phone call a couple of days later, and they asked me if I wanted to be an assistant costume designer in a movie for a film production that was coming to New York. And I said, yes, I'd love to. And that was my first movie. I was an assistant costume designer, and I never really looked back.
Wow. Well, so it sounds to me as if perhaps Brenau helped give you the confidence to be able, because I think that takes a great deal of confidence and daring to just be willing to step in like that. And here you are, poof, you're an assistant costume designer on an actual film. I mean, that must be extraordinary.
Well, I mean, it sounds very glamorous, but it really wasn't that glamorous. I mean, first of all, they told me, oh, well, I didn't get any money. I did it for free. Because I felt like I was going to make an investment in myself and in my business, and I had no experience. So I worked for free and I figured it out. And, I felt like it was such a great privilege to be a part of this project. I love movies. My mother started taking me to the movies, to the Tivoli Theater, which was, we would go see On the Town. If you haven't seen any of these movies, you should watch them, everybody out there, because they're amazing, amazing films. On the Town, Wuthering Heights, Guys and Dolls, Gone with the Wind. I mean, the Wizard of Oz, Gigi. I mean, all of these old classic movies, they were such a huge part of my childhood because my mother loved old movies too. So, I had that connection to film, even though I didn't know that there was a whole entire team of people creating film, creating TV shows, creating movies. I already had this great love for movies, but when I got this film first job as an assistant designer, I had no idea that in the film business, you have to work all night if the scenes are set in the nighttime. So, my costume designer, who was my boss, said, okay, well, we're going to shoot the movie and we're going to work all-nighters. And I was like, you mean we have to stay up all night? No. You mean all night? I couldn't believe what he was saying to me. He said, yes, Janie, that's how movies are made. I had no idea, of course, clueless. And also, he also told me, I understood, while we were shooting that the film was shot out of sequence. And so I had just felt like, oh my gosh, all these years I've been watching movies. I love movies, and I've been bamboozled of like how, like it's totally different. Like what I see on the screen is totally different than how it was made. So that was kind of my first experience of, oh, this is the reality of filmmaking. It's 14, 16 hours a day of working, and sometimes you have to shoot all-nighters, and you have to cut corners as far as like creating costumes and dealing with budgets. And so, I mean, there's, it's a lot of work that goes into filmmaking that, the audience just sees the glitz and the glamour on the screen. And that's why, Hollywood is so amazing, because it is all a facade. It is all smoke and mirrors, and we create this world of fantasy.
The dream factory.
It is. I mean, and that's why it's so magical. And I mean, and also when you find out what the reality of it is, you're like, oh, okay, that's a real job. It's not like, it's not like I'm going to work in, high heels and fur coats every day.
Oh, my illusions are shattered.
I'm sorry.
I thought you'd be draped in diamonds every day, all day.
That is a very good idea. I'm going to dream on that one.
Well, we talked a little bit about this because I'm really not aware of what the gender situation looks like in your field until we spoke a bit about this. And the reason that I wanted us to talk about this is the GOLD program, which is the signature co-curricular program for the Women's College, focuses each year on one of the themes. And GOLD is an acronym. I'll say this for our audience. So the G stands for gender awareness. The O stands for ownership of civic and personal responsibility. The L stands for leadership, and the D is for diversity, inclusion, and global perspective. So granted, we've packed a lot in there, and we're focusing year by year on each of those pillars, really. And we just launched the program last fall, so naturally our focus was the G year and gender awareness. And it seems especially fitting that you're here with us today to kind of help us wrap up that year as we're looking ahead to the O year and planning many, many things, which I'll speak about a little bit later. But so tell us, what is the situation for women in costume design?
Well, women don't make as much as the men do, especially in costume design. I mean, this is our battle. Pay equity is our battle. And I would have to say that for the positions that are mostly men, like cinematographers or directors or production designers, or even like the grip department, the electric department, which are positions that are typically male positions, they do get paid more than the women, especially in costume design, which is still crazy. And I mean, that is something that we women really have to address, not only on a costume design level, but as on a government level. I mean, Congress needs to pass the ERA basically, and we need to be paid equally. And that is the bottom line. And we're not there yet. And that's the truth. Typically and traditionally, the film business has been a real men's world. And I think that is slowly changing. I mean, we are seeing more female directors. We are seeing more female executives. We are seeing more females in even in the more positions of being grips, electrics, all of those kind of like traditionally male jobs. But yes, costume designers, we should be paying more. We should be paid more. Probably, I believe that we should be paid on scale with what the production designers make. Because production designers, I mean, they do build the entire set or the locations in terms of like where the actors are going to be. Costume designers create the characters visually and help tell the story of the characters through their costume design. And we work directly with the actors. So unlike production designers that don't have to work with the actors, costume designers have to be one-on-one with the actors to create this character and to work with these stars. So very different jobs and very different pressures, both being, very important to filmmaking.
Right. And I think to your point about costume designers are really helping tell that character story and show their art. And that seems really profound and powerful to me. And I think that it's really evident in your work. And I know I said this to you, but it seemed to me with Mad Men, your costume design set that time period more than anything else that was happening in the show in many ways. We could see how those women were dressed and pretty much know exactly where we were in time and space, it seems to me. So I'm hoping that now we could talk a little bit about some of your favorite designs, and we're very fortunate that we have some to share with our audience today. And so these are some fabulous designs from your Emmy nominated work on Mad Men, and we're delighted to be able to share these with our audience. So Ashley is going to show those designs for us. And as they come up, if you could just tell us a little bit about what we're seeing, Janie, and how you approach these characters and their arcs.
Yeah, so we're seeing a picture of Betty and of Peggy. And Betty, I always had such complete compassion for her because she was imprisoned by her time. And she was expected to be married and be a mother and to present this facade of perfection at all times. And I just always felt like because of her personal unhappiness, she was always trying to create a facade and to be perfect and to be icy and cool and cold. And so I loved the idea of her being in like tones of camel and light blues and kind of like ice blues and grays. This very kind of like highbrow palette of perfection. And then with Peggy, Peggy, when we first see Peggy and we start the series, I just always felt like Peggy was very earnest. She was a schoolgirl. And so I loved this idea of plaid and polka dots and checks and very like schoolgirl iconic fabrics. And as the series goes along, you can really see their arc and their character change by what their shifts in the costume design make for them.
Well, and in fact, when I was talking with President Sclater about today's event and your work, and she has a question that I think is a really great one, and that is about what was your vision in moving Peggy from secretary to boss? And as Anne said, hers is really, in a way, the story of a nation.
Well, Peggy's story is quite amazing, and and that story was not written by me or created by me. That was created by our creator and executive producer, Matthew Weiner. And he really loved that idea of Peggy and Don having this relationship where she starts in a lower position, he's her boss, and they kind of, throughout the series, kind of change positions. And then Peggy ends up as the boss. And so I loved this arc for Peggy. I loved how she got out of plaids and polka dots and really moved into an executive way of dressing with her power suits of the 60s and, wearing those very strong colors. I had her in navy a lot and, with accents of like orange. I feel like, orange is the color of enlightenment. So she was definitely going through like this enlightened phase. And she also wore, like reds a lot and rusts. And I always felt like those were super strong colors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ashley, I think we have some more. There we go. I see the men now.
Yes.
Dapper.
I love menswear so much. So this is actually this suit that Don Draper is wearing. That was the first collaboration that I did, which was with Brooks Brothers. And that's the suit that I made for him for the season. Brooks Brothers produced the period vintage suits according to my design, my specs. And then we also made a contemporary Brooks Brothers Mad Men suit that sold out in the first week. It was pretty amazing. Wow. And so it was made out of this shark skin, gray shark skin. It looks more taupey now because of the lighting, but it was actually a very like a gray, classic gray shark skin suit. And I always loved the idea of Don being in gray because throughout the 7 years, he would wear different tones, different shades of gray. And that was more about creating his armor because he too, like Betty, was always creating a facade. And so I loved the idea of his suit being his protection. And so gray was kind of like his signature color. And then for Sterling, you know, because he comes from a more classic background and, you know, was in business 15, 20 years before Don was, I love that idea of him being in a more classic style of dressing, which would be the three-piece suit. And I tried to get John to wear suspenders, but he said, absolutely not. I will not wear suspenders. He hates suspenders. If you ever meet John Slattery, don't show him a pair of suspenders. And he's so lovely. I mean, we had really just cracked up together so many times. He just always made so much fun of me because I would always be like, John, suspenders. And anyway, we had a lot of jokes. And he, you know, would wear like the collar bar and the club collar, which was the rounded collar a lot of times. I mean, I would change it up, but I just wanted to add those details that kind of gave him a more classic, older look to his costume design.
They really just look spectacular, don't they?
Thank you.
There, look there. That's amazing.
Yeah, so Joan, this was, I think, season 6. And at this point, you know, Joan was definitely moving up in Sterling Cooper. And we were moving into the later 60s. So I wanted to move Joan into a period that was a little more modern because she was always kind of in that late 1950s wiggle dress Marilyn Monroe style. I mean, she is a character who definitely knows the power of femininity and always used it, right? And so, but for this season, because she had more money, I designed a lot of costumes for her that were just pushed her a little bit more forward into the later 60s. And then this gown for Betty, I designed for her. We had to make 3 of these gowns because if you remember in the scene, this is when she finds out that Don has been cheating on her. And she really comes to the realization that she knows what's going on, that he is cheating on her. So she gets sick in the car. And so I had to make 3 of the gowns just in case she had special effects throw up on her dress. Excuse me. I know that sounds so awful, but that is true. That's what we do. And this dress actually was an inspiration from one of my mother's dresses from the early 60s, which was actually a gray cocktail dress, so it was shorter length. And it was an inspiration to make this gown. And I wanted to make it in this darker blue Chinese brocade because it was a very strong moment for Betty coming to the realization that her husband had been unfaithful.
Well, she looks spectacular there. That dress is just amazing. And actually, I wondered while watching the show, what were the challenges maybe, and how did you approach, I'm just going to put it right out there, but period undergarments, you know, the pointy bras and all of that. And I think that I read that you did use actual vintage undergarments. right?
I mean, sometimes I did, but I sometimes, we would find very well preserved undergarments, but for the most part, I would have them made, or we would use Reproduction Undergarments from a company called Rago, and they still make the long line girdles. They still make the open bottom girdles. They still make the one piece girdles. They still make the pointy bras that you have to buy. Also separately, the tips. So it's the foam tips that will go into the cup of your bra. I mean, girls, y'all have no idea how easy you got it. I mean, seriously. But it's so important in costume design because, foundation garments are all about how your clothes look on the outside, right? So if those actresses were not wearing their proper foundation garments, it really would hinder them in not being able to have that transformation of time, which is so important. And their clothes wouldn't fit properly over their bodies if they were not wearing the proper foundation garments. So, foundation garments help you hold yourself in a period way. They help the actors transform into another time. I mean, it's such an important piece of it. Even though, the audience doesn't see it, it's all about how the costumes fit over the foundation garments too.
Right. So there's the whole other story of what's going on underneath in a way that makes it look as it does.
Yes, exactly. And, it's important for a woman to be mysterious anyway. So we girls can learn great lessons from our women of the past.
Okay, and I'm still cracking up over the foam tips. Who knew? I had no idea.
Foam tips, a lot of them. Foam tips.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, you should have seen my costume shop. We had, baskets and baskets and baskets of foam tips.
Now it looks as if we've moved into the 60s a little bit.
Yes, well, this is the scene where Megan, she surprises her husband Don with a little zooby zooby zoo, and she wears the first mini dress on the screen of Mad Men. And I just love this scene so much, and I wanted it to be black because Megan's and Don's apartment was very white, and so the black really stood out, and she's singing this, French song, Zooby Zooby Zoo. And so black was the perfect color for, her little Frenchy song. It was great. And then she also wore the fishnet tights. And I had the sleeves rebuilt on this dress because the body of it is a vintage piece. And then I just rebuilt the sunburst pleated silk organza sleeves.
Pretty impressive. And then when you look at the eye makeup as well, you're just sort of instantly transported, I think.
Yes, that is the beautiful work of Lana Horachowski, who is also on Instagram, and she's so talented. And now she's designing the makeup for Glow.
Oh, so this is very exciting, and our audience now has lots of other places to go to check out what's happening and to see the work of all these really talented people who've pulled off something like this. Ashley, I believe is that our last image, I think? Ah, there we go.
And there is Joan in her sailor dress. And, I wanted Joan to have this dress. I designed this dress for her for this scene in particular because this is when she's left Sterling Cooper and she's gone to the department store to work. And I just love that idea of her having a sailor collar at the department store because I felt like it was something less secretarial and more shop girl style. So that was the importance of the sailor collar. And the writing, that was the season of Betty and her equestrian looks, which I love so much. I mean, that is all about, the tweeds, the ascots, the knee boots. I mean, what a beautiful season that was. I loved that season.
Really?
That is all about, like town and country, and Betty wanting to really have that lifestyle,
And as you say, it reveals so much about the character's inner life and their desires and that character arc. Ah, there we go.
So this dress for Megan, I actually found at this little vintage store called Jet Rag. And Jet Rag is in Los Angeles, and you can literally go on the weekend and stuff a bag full of old clothes in a shopping bag for like $10. And this is a very, very special piece because I had just gone there on a whim, and I kind of saw the colors sticking out of a rack, and I pulled it out. It's like, this has to be a Vera print. I don't know if y'all know about Vera prints, but Vera, she designed some of the most iconic prints of the 60s. And this is a Vera print little cover up. And, you know, I grabbed that thing and I went straight up to the counter and paid my $15. Little did they know what they had on hanging on that rack. But I loved it for this Hawaiian scene because, you know, this is all about Megan and Dawn and the beach and being on vacation together and having this whole kind of like romantic time. It's kind of, and after this episode, I mean, it all kind of falls apart, but it was really important for this episode to just feel so luscious and flirty and beautiful. And this scene, actually, where Megan is on the beach looking at Dawn being a part of this soldier's wedding, because he's met this soldier at the bar the night before. The bride is actually wearing my Aunt Linda's wedding gown.
No kidding.
No, believe me, I borrowed every single piece of clothing I could from all of my family members.
That's incredible. One, that they have the clothing that's preserved, and then that they can watch it on television. That's amazing.
It is. It's immortalized. My Aunt Linda's wedding gown is immortalized, and well, Betty wore my mother's wedding gown too.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea. Well, and as we mentioned at the beginning, everybody, you can see a lot more of Janie's designs on her Instagram account. Costume designer Janie Bryant. It's amazing. So you can get a lot more, take a lot more looks at these designs. They're just truly amazing. And I realized that we've focused on only one of the many shows that you have been a vital part of. So tell us a little bit about some current and recent projects. I know that we've spoken a lot about Mad Men, and you got that Emmy for Deadwood, of course. You've worked recently on projects set in those fabulous 20s and 30s. What inspires you most about the eras with which you've worked, and do you have a favorite?
Well, you know, with each project, it starts with reading the script. And the script is like reading a great book, and you are turning through the pages and imagining what all these characters are going to look like and how I can tell that story visually. So the script is really the place at which I start understanding what these characters are saying to each other, what the period is, and the dynamics of the style of the script. So, you know, the script really tells you a lot of information. And then I'll start my research process, and then I'll start sketching. I'll do my fabric swatches. I'll have my design meetings with the director or the executive producer. Then we start having creative conversations. So it kind of starts that way each time. And but really the inspiration does come from the script, because that's really where, you know, you learn about these people. And then, like I said, it's, you know, about research, and then I'll start having my fittings, and I'm working with the actors, and then we'll start building the costumes, and, you know, we have our deadlines, and we hope that everything gets finished in time, and we send the actors out, and they film them, and then, you know, there it is.
And then there it is.
And then there it is, just like that.
Just like that, magically. I'm sure the research is a lot of fun as well. So tell us.
I love that part. I love that part. I mean, I definitely get a lot of inspiration from researching. And I can research, from watching old movies, from magazines, from looking at old photographs, I'll go to the internet. There's a research library at Western Costume where Western Costume has been around for 100 years. They've been working with costume designers since the beginning of filmmaking. And so they have an incredible research library. So I do a lot of my research that way as well. And I will look through catalogs and read, and it's a lot of fun. I love imagining the characters and really visualizing what that two-dimensional page what the three-dimensional person is going to look like once they're cast and we film them.
I love that quote, taking it from 2 dimensions to 3, really. And I can see exactly how that it does that. So I believe that you launched not too long ago a clothing line, a luxury line for curvy women called JXB. Would you tell us a little bit about that and what inspired you to create this line?
Well, it's interesting because as costume designer, I work with all different bodies, and men and women, old and young, children. I mean, I'm not a fashion designer. I'm a costume designer, so it's creating characters. And so the actors are all different shapes and sizes. And I was really noticing a huge trend that, I was noticing a huge trend that women that were larger than a size 10 or 12 had no clothing or no options. And so, especially when it comes to luxury, because a lot of those lines are more of throwaway garments. And so I really felt like there was a need in the market to have very stylish, very chic, very well-made garments for curvy girls.
I think that's really exciting. As you know, what is the average size for women in America? I think it's a 14, maybe. These days.
12 or 14. Yeah. And I think there are more options now, which is great. But yeah, I felt like the market really needed a place for that. And I did, that was a collaboration. And so that was 2 collections.
Well, we should all look for those. And I know that a lot of people with us today will be very interested in seeing some of those designs and possibly getting a chance to wear some of them. So I thought what we might do, Janie, here at the end, we've been collecting some questions from students, and we obviously have some questions that are rolling in right now from our audience members. And our very own Dawn Marie Bernhardt, who is the Director of Development Programs, has agreed to be keeping up with these questions and to rattle some off for us. So take it away, Dawn Marie.
So much for being here. I'm so glad that I get to ask you the questions from the students and staff and faculty. They're all very enthusiastic and they've been rolling in.
Good.
Now, a lot of you have actually answered, so I've been trying to compile them. Like, they wanted to know how much of, yourself you had put into some of your designs, and if there were dresses and pieces that you had used from your past. And you answered that with your aunt's wedding dress and a couple of other things. But what about Easter eggs? Is there any Easter eggs that us rabid fans can know about, or go back and look at the series and see if there's something in there that you could tell us that's exciting?
Wait, what do you want to know though? Which part?
In Mad Men, are there any Easter eggs that people could go back and look for?
Oh, Easter eggs. Easter eggs.
Something that's hidden in there that no one would know about but you.
Okay, so Betty wears a lot of my grandmother's aprons. And my grandmother, she had a whole entire collection of aprons because she would make, mostly she made all of her clothes, and she also made aprons to go with all of her outfits because she was an amazing hostess and an amazing housewife and always had lots and lots of parties. And so I was so lucky and fortunate to be able to have her aprons that I would have Betty wear. Also, my mother's cashmere sweaters. Betty wears those as well. And I don't think I've ever even said that before. And I can tell you that I'm trying to go back. It seems like a long time ago. Yes, I said Betty wore my mother's wedding gown. If I think of any more, I'll let you know. But yeah, those are good ones.
That's fantastic. I love that a little piece of you and a little piece of your history imbues those designs and carries forward. It's nice. It's you paying homage to your ancestors, which I love.
Yes, well, you know, a big part of design, why I loved designing Mad Men is because that really is my grandparents' era. And, you know, my grandfather was part of that 3 martini lunch. And, you know, he was always with the businessmen. I mean, he kind of lived a Mad Men lifestyle, you know, in terms of like the smoking and the drinking and the parties. And my grandmother hostessing fabulous, you know, cocktail parties. And I mean, I feel like that's such, you know, days gone by that we really don't live like that anymore, you know. And so Mad Men like holds a special place in my heart because of that.
Yes. And you know, I'm not exactly sure how they could do the 3 martini lunches without doing a 3 martini nap afterwards, but good on them. I mean, to have that kind of fun.
They were used to it. They were used to it. You know, they were smoking in the office. They were having cocktails. They were, you know, drinking from, you know, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. or where they kind of like had the steady drip. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how they did it either. I could not do it, but it was part of, you know, being a businessman during that time. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about it, but it is true.
That's amazing. Mira, who is one of our folks on here, asked the direct question: there is a big difference between fashion design and historical research in costuming. How do you blend the two to make it wearable and fashion?
Well, it depends. I mean, if I am designing a fashion line, then that would be designing contemporary pieces to be worn by contemporary consumers today, which has a totally different motivation, intention of working as a costume designer, which is a totally different job, where I am being historically correct as much as possible. I mean, we're not making period films or period TV. We're not making a documentary. And, you know, so it's not always exactly as history was. But in costume design, and especially if it's a period piece that I'm designing, I'm trying to be accurate as well as helping to tell a story of a character. So, I mean, fashion design is for the consumer and for a consumer to wear those pieces, and costume design is to help tell the story of a character visually.
Well, that actually leads into one of the other questions that someone had asked. In what way does the costume designer contribute to other design aesthetics or the visual elements of the show, lighting, set dressing, etc.? How much of what you do influences their process, and how much of their process influences you?
Well, that is a great question. We do all work together in terms of department heads, cinematographer, production designer, costume designer, hair and makeup team. Especially on a period show, it's so important that we kind of all know what each other is doing, because a lot of times if I have, you know, let's just say an amazing costume that I'm designing for a character, I will tell the cinematographer, please get a full length shot of this costume. It's very important. It's, you know, a visual paradise. Everyone's going to want to see this. Or maybe the cinematographer is going to do a special kind of lighting. So he would come to me and say, Janie, we're going to do this kind of lighting. These colors are going to be better than others. Or the production designer may be doing a crazy wall color, and I need to design costumes that fit in with that crazy wall color that the production designer is doing. perfect example. Y'all are going to love this. So I designed the costumes for the movie It. And, you know, Pennywise, the clown, he has a very gray, like distressed silk costume that's pleated, that's woven. You know, a lot of details went into that costume because a couple of reasons. I wanted it to be gray so it would match the colors of the cistern that's like down in the depths of where, you know, where Pennywise lived, underneath the house there. I don't know if y'all have seen the movie, but so it was very important that Pennywise costume matched the wall color of his environment. And also I wanted to design a costume that kind of Pennywise was timeless. So he lived for hundreds and hundreds of years. So I really wanted to incorporate many different periods in that one costume. So that's kind of how Pennywise came to be. And actually, when I first designed the costume, there was an article out in Entertainment Magazine with a big picture of Pennywise on the cover. And I got so many Facebook messages and Twitter messages. I mean, people were so mad that Pennywise, I got one message that, you know, he didn't understand why the costume designer of Mad Men was designing a drunken clown. And people were furious about why Pennywise was not in a colorful clown outfit that he had been in 1990 when the movie first came out, because the one in 2017 was the remake of the 1990 version, right? And that is, in essence, the power of costume design. People were so attached to the colorful clown, and then now people don't even remember what the clown of 1990 looks like. They only know what Pennywise looks like as it in 2017 and still today.
My friend dressed her 3-year-old son up as Pennywise for Halloween, and it terrified the entire neighborhood.
Well, you know what? I actually went into my pet store this past Halloween, and there was a dog costume that was it was a Pennywise dog costume, and I called my agent. I was like, "Why am I not getting paid for this?"
There should be a royalty somewhere for that pet costume.
If we had only knew that he would have been so famous. Yes.
That's pretty amazing. Christina asks on here, some of this you've answered, but she wanted to know what projects would you work on that you haven't done before? What do you have coming up that you haven't worked on, or what do you have coming up that you'd like to work on, and what are things that you aspire to work on?
Well, I mean, I'm not working on any film projects right now. The film business is trying to figure out how we are going to shoot projects in the future. And so, but when we do come back, there's 2 shows that I'm working on. One is The Old Man with Jeff Bridges and John Lithgow. And the next is Why Women Kill, season 2. And I love that show so much. I cannot wait to go back to design that show. I would really love to design a project from the 1770s, which is Rococo Baroque, which is my favorite period. That would just be a dream. And but I'm working on some other projects. I'm working on. I can't tell y'all all the details, but dreams really do come true. I'm going to be working on a menswear collection. I love menswear. And then I have a couple other projects that are going to be coming up that I'm really excited about, that are outside of costume design. They're design collaborations.
Well, we're going to be watching to see what you do next. And I know we have lots and lots more questions that we would love to ask that we won't have time for today, but Janie has very graciously agreed to answer more questions with people on her Instagram account. So definitely reach out to her. But I do want to ask her one final one before we have a little bit of a surprise for at least 2 members of our audience. They don't know about this yet. But Janie, if you could offer any word of advice to a young woman just starting out in a creative field, maybe a new graduate, in fact, might even be somebody who's here with us today, class of 2020. What kind of advice would you give to her? What advice
Well,
wish you had had?
you know what? I think it's so important to have dreams and to go after your dreams. That is your guiding force. And, you know, you have to be very strong in your self-awareness and your self-knowledge to know that that's something you totally believe in yourself and you can make anything happen. Don't take no for an answer. Do not, especially if you believe in your dream and in yourself. I think that is so important. Do not compare yourself to anybody. When I was first starting, you know, people would always talk about other costume designers. I would not even listen to it. I wouldn't listen. I mean, I can learn from other costume designers in terms of watching their work, but I just felt like when I was going on a job interview, there was only me. I have my own special talent. I'm the only person out there that is me. And I think that when you start comparing yourself to others, you go into a non-productive space. So, you know, I think it's about just really being mindful of that. I think the other thing that's very important is to set goals, make an inspiration board, put everything on that board that you dream about, and you meditate on that, you make it happen, and you just keep on going. You know, I mean, it's like, believe me, I've had many triumphs, I've had failures, I've had setbacks, and I just always keep on going.
So I think that's very good advice for all of us, no matter where we are. But for all the students and recent alums who are with us today, I hope you really heard what Janie had to say, because she's right. You have to have those dreams and you must pursue them, or nothing is going to happen, right? You have to make it happen. Absolutely. We're going to come back to Janie in just a second, but I'm delighted to say that we are going to give a little gift to two of you who are with us today. You've been randomly selected, at least I hope that's happened behind the scenes. I can't see it from where I am, but Ashley Carter can see it. So our student, Sophia Casey, recently designed this shirt. This is her own drawing of Pierce Auditorium that will look very familiar to most of you. And she put them up for sale to raise money for the Student Emergency Fund. And I really give her a lot of kudos for that. And I'm somebody who happened to buy a couple of them so that I could give them to a couple of you today. So we will be mailing those out to you. Ashley, can you tell us who are our two lucky winners today?
Yes. So can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The two lucky winners are Paige Shamblin maybe on the last name, and Julia Rodriguez. So
Yay!
I'll email both of you with the email address that you used to register and get your mailing address so we can send those shirts to you. Make sure we get the size and all that stuff.
So congratulations to Julia and Paige. You'll soon be wearing this fabulous new shirt that has helped raise some money for the emergency fund for our very own students. So thank you so much. So I would like us to thank Ashley again. I mean, well, I do thank Ashley, but I thank Janie more than I thank Ashley, although Ashley's done all the work. I'm thankful to Dawn Marie and to her team, to Ashley and her team, to the tech team, it's taken a village, people. It might not look like it, but it has. I'm especially thankful to our guest, Janie Bryant, the amazing Emmy award-winning costume designer and proud Brenau alumna. We thank you for the inspiration that you've brought us today, for sharing your story. And I'd like to invite you, Janie, your team, and everybody who's with us today for our next Gold Series speaker. That will be Norma Hernandez, who is the founder of the Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and who is the Hall County Chair of the COVID Task Force. So she will be with us on September 1st at 12:45. On September 16th, Justice Leah Ward Sears, the first African-American woman to serve on the Georgia Supreme Court, will be with us. That's September 16th at 12:45. So Janie, you can see that you're an illustrious company. We thank you so, so very much today for being with us. I thank all of our participants for joining us. Stay tuned. Amazing things are happening at the Women's College of Brenau University. So thanks to all of you. Let's all give Janie a virtual round of applause.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be a part of it, Deborah, and thank you everyone for joining us and being here. And anyway, I hope everyone is well and safe, and just thank you again.
Thank
And
you.
I have to say that you do have a suite mate that's online that said, no questions, just wanted to say congratulations on your success and just thrilled to see you here. Sending you much love from your old Academy suite mate, Jane Williams. So you have some of your classmates online.
That's
The
so
Brenau
great.
sisterhood is in
Thank
action.
you, Jane.
Oh,
Y'all are
that's
gonna make me cry.
Here's to
Thank
the
you.
sisterhood, everybody.
To the
Thank you.
sisterhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
all so much.